In today's world, everyone thinks they're playing the same game: family, school, work, business. But the truth? Most people are just reacting. Few are actually thinking ahead. If Niccolò Machiavelli lived in our time, scrolling through social media, raising kids in chaos, working under manipulative bosses, or negotiating million-dollar deals, he'd dominate every field, not because he's cruel, but because he understands people better than they understand themselves. This isn't about being evil, it's about being aware. In this video, we'll break down how Machiavelli would think ahead of everyone else in today's world, and how his 9 brutal laws for a strategic mind would apply in your family life, your education, your workplace, and your business deals. These aren't theories, they're situational truths. Raw, uncomfortable, but necessary, if you're tired of being outmaneuvered, manipulated, or underestimated. Stay until the end. Because by the time you finish this video, you'll start seeing the world the way Machiavelli would have, not emotionally, but strategically. Make sure to hit subscribe, like, and share this video if you want more brutally honest breakdowns on modern strategy, mindset, and power, the kind that cuts through fake motivation and shows you how to actually win. When your teenager wakes you up at midnight furious because their best friend just posted something embarrassing, don't soothe, strategize. Machiavelli would see that the social fallout is a battlefield where reputation and future opportunities are shaped overnight. He would sit the kid down, map who saw the post, who will spread it, who can be enlisted to quiet it down, and then act with controlled calm. He'd coach the teenager to post one measured message that reframes the narrative, privately message allies to back it up, and quietly pull the account settings and screenshotted evidence to preserve leverage. He wouldn't moralize about empathy or kids will be kids, he'd treat it as a reputation management operation. Teaching the child how to control perception, respond with minimal emotion, and remove fuel from the fire so this one incident doesn't become the story they're boxed into for months. When siblings explode into a screaming fight about chores and parental favoritism, Machiavelli would refuse to be the passive referee. He'd convert the argument into a structure where incentives and dependencies change behavior. Instead of lecturing fairness, he'd redesign the system so that cooperation benefits each child more than the quarreling does, assign tasks that play to strengths, create small, transparent rewards tied to responsibilities, and make shared privileges contingent on collective performance. He'd also engineer controlled competition, private one-on-one challenges that channel resentment into measurable outcomes, and keep parents' praise strategically distributed so no child grows complacent or entitled, because long-term harmony comes from predictable rules and calculated incentives, not from platitudes. If your child suddenly starts underperforming at school after switching friend groups, Machiavelli would treat it as a shift in alliances rather than a mysterious decline. He'd map the new social graph, who influences homework habits, who normalizes skipping, and then insert himself as a new, more attractive node. That means arranging a mentor, scheduling a study buddy swap with a reliable peer, or introducing extracurriculars that elevate the child's status among desirable friends. He wouldn't wait for motivation to return, he'd manufacture a new context where succeeding is the quickest route to social capital. The lesson for the child is transactional: change your associations and your outcomes change. Loyalty to a bad network is the real enemy. At a family dinner where politics or religion is tearing people apart, Machiavelli would never let the argument define the family's image in public or on social media. He would train the household to perform unity in front of outsiders and to save raw conflict for controlled, private interventions. He'd set conversational rules: no phones at the table, a 1-minute cooling period before rebuttal, and appoint neutral moderators when tensions spike. If someone refuses, he'd place consequences that matter: temporarily revoke privileges, limit invitations, or redistribute chores. He knows that unchecked public fights degrade social standing and open you to long-term schisms. So he'd close the leaks and use small, enforceable penalties to steer behavior without theatrics. When a child is being bullied at school, Machiavelli would not immediately demand the principal's involvement or preach morals. He'd gather evidence, build alliances, and change the calculus for the bully. He'd coach the child to document incidents, quietly recruit witnesses, and create consequences that the bully, and the school, cannot ignore. Simultaneously he'd carve out a social fortress, arrange friendships with strong peers, put the child in activities where they can shine, and make the bully's attacks lose their audience. If the administration fails, he'd escalate publicly in a controlled way that harms the school's reputation enough to force change but avoids casting the family as litigious or vengeful. The aim is not revenge, it's to make bullying a less profitable strategy. When a parent must confront adolescent addiction to screens, Machiavelli would avoid moralizing bans and instead redesign incentives and dependencies. He'd offer a trade, more freedom in exchange for measurable responsibilities, grades, chores, real-world activities, and attach immediate, visible benefits, a weekend trip, a new responsibility, when benchmarks are met. He'd also manipulate the environment, change Wi-Fi passwords at scheduled times, centralize devices for charging, and orchestrate social proof by scheduling friends who also follow limits. He'd teach the child that the easiest path to privileges is controlled discipline, not rebellion. The plan is to make the parents' rules the most efficient route to what the teenager actually values. When a parent faces divorce and children are being used as weaponry between exes, Machiavelli would approach custody and communication like a negotiation to control future narratives. He'd meticulously document interactions, create consistent public messages about the children's routines, and keep private grievances off social feeds. Where possible he'd create structures, fixed visitation schedules, neutral exchange locations, mediated communication channels, that make conflict costly and cooperation convenient. If the ex tries to weaponize the kid's image or school relationships, he'd strategically involve third parties, counselors, principals, so complaints lose the personal edge and become procedural matters. His aim: make stability and normalcy the default path because children trapped in chaos are political liabilities for both parents. When a high school student has to choose between a safe but uninspiring college path and a risky entrepreneurial route, Machiavelli would act like a strategist choosing positions on a battlefield, not an idealist choosing destiny. He'd evaluate which path builds the most optionality, the degree that opens networks and credentials versus the startup that could create rapid leverage but also fires you into anonymity. He'd recommend hybrid moves: take the degree while starting the project on the side, or secure internships that bridge both worlds, because Machiavelli's core is redundancy. He'd advise the student to cultivate mentors, gather small wins that can be parlayed into credibility, and avoid burning bridges. In his calculus, you never put all your reputation on one roll of the dice. In a group school project where one member does all the work and others coast, Machiavelli would treat the dynamic as a micro-power struggle, reward, punish, and reframe incentives to shift behavior. He'd coach the overworked student to make contributions visible, submit parts under their name, log editing timestamps, and create deliverables that force accountability. He'd also privately offer the slackers a simple choice: contribute meaningfully or accept a lower grade publicly, and then follow through. If necessary, he'd reassign roles using the teacher's rubric, presenting it as a clarifying structure rather than punishment. The goal is to convert latent free-riding into explicit trade-offs. When an employee discovers their boss is hoarding promotions while praising others publicly, Machiavelli would advise playing the long political game rather than immediate confrontation. He'd map the boss's dependencies, who they need to succeed, which stakeholders they fear, what metrics make them look good. The employee would then provide value in a way that the boss cannot ignore, solve a visible problem, attach the boss's success to the employee's contribution, or quietly gather allies in other departments to broaden influence. If the boss still resists, Machiavelli would recommend discreet exit options, cultivate networks outside the company, build a personal brand, and prepare to leave on terms that make the boss feel your absence as a loss rather than a betrayal. When the office is toxic and gossip spreads, Machiavelli would not be moralistic, he would shape the narrative and the flows of information. He'd selectively share wins with the right audiences, leak small, positive metrics to influential stakeholders, and cultivate a handful of defenders who can vouch for you in private. He'd avoid public fights and instead engineer meetings where your competence is undeniable, come prepared with data, name allies, and create dependencies, be the person who solves the problem others dread. If exclusion persists, he'd use subtle sabermetrics of reputation, document slights, escalate strategically, and if the culture is irredeemable, exit in a way that preserves your standing and burns no bridges. When you face a surprise layoff in your tech company, Machiavelli would treat it as an opportunity to reposition rather than a personal indictment. He'd immediately marshal proofs of value, saved cost numbers, client testimonials, and use them to create a short public dossier that reframes the narrative should the company downplay your contribution. At the same time, he'd network like a tactician, contacting former allies, sharing problem-solving case studies, and offering temporary consultancy to keep cash flow and reputation intact. If the layoff was politically motivated, he'd quietly leverage legal or HR complaints only when they served to extract a better exit, otherwise he'd turn the crisis into a personal marketing campaign that leads to a stronger next role. When a mid-level manager must ask for a raise in a company that flatters but underpays, Machiavelli would prepare a dossier that makes refusal costly. He'd document measurable wins, align them with strategic goals, and show how your departure would create operational friction. He'd privately float his market value to recruiters to create leverage, then present the choice to the company as one between investing in continuity or dealing with disruption. If the company refuses, he'd be ready to walk with a counteroffer opportunity already in pocket. He understands that asking is not a plea, done correctly, it's a negotiation that should leave the employer with a clear incentive to keep you. When a startup founder is negotiating with a VC who promises fast money but wants heavy control, Machiavelli would value control over cash every time unless the capital is mission critical. He'd break the negotiation into components, valuation, governance, milestones, and kill switches. He'd allow the VC to feel dominant in small, symbolic concessions, a board observer seat, a veto on certain hires, while keeping core control, founder shares, blocking rights on core IP, and staged financing tied to performance. He'd also set up parallel funding channels so the VC knows their leverage is not absolute. The founder's job is to make the investor want to back him because the founder remains the indispensable architect of the vision. When a business partner is slow to pay invoices and politely unresponsive, Machiavelli would treat softness as a liability. He'd start with private, firm reminders and then escalate methodically, interest charges, formal letters, and carving out slow pay penalties in the next contracts. He'd simultaneously offer a path that maintains the relationship, structured payment plans, future discount for on-time settlement, while making delayed payments visibly costly to the partner's reputation. If the partner resists, he'd redirect their clients to other service providers or publicize the unpaid invoices in controlled circles. In his calculus, tolerance of debt invites more debt, you must make reliability the cheapest option. When a company contemplates a merger with a competitor, Machiavelli would obsess over integration and post-signing governance rather than the honeymoon numbers. He'd insist on clauses that protect his side, retention bonuses for key talent, escrowed payments tied to customer retention, and dispute resolution that favors continuity. He'd quietly position his people in integration teams to control narratives and guard against cultural exfiltration. He wouldn't celebrate until the legal, cultural, and customer front lines are secured. Many deals die not at signing but in the slow death of mismanagement, so he'd plan for the tedious, unglamorous work that keeps victory sustainable. When a small business must compete with a giant offering a cheaper product, Machiavelli would stop trying to beat on price and instead create dependency. He'd bundle services that the giant cannot replicate quickly, embed work into the client's operations, and use superior relationships to lock in switching costs. He'd make the client rely on custom integrations, personal trust, or white-glove support so that the economics of switching become unattractive. If price wars begin, he'd focus on niche segments where the giant's scale is irrelevant. His aim: be indispensable in ways money alone cannot immediately displace. When a corporation mishandles an ethical scandal and PR teams want to apologize publicly, Machiavelli would weigh confession against containment. He'd prefer a strategy that controls the narrative and minimizes future liability, quick internal fixes, reparations to those harmed, and a carefully framed public message that accepts responsibility while emphasizing corrective action. He would avoid groveling or grandstanding. Performative remorse invites scrutiny. The goal is to convert scandal into a credibility-building exercise by showing clear, verifiable change, because real power after a scandal lies with those who can credibly assure future safety. When a child is gifted academically but socially isolated, Machiavelli would not simply applaud brilliance, he'd engineer social capital around it. He'd place the child in settings where their talents are visible and valued, competitions, clubs, mentorship programs, and coach them in social currency so their intellect becomes an asset, not a wedge. He'd work with teachers to create roles that make classmates see the gifted child as a resource rather than a threat. Making brilliance useful to others reduces envy and creates allies. That strategic repositioning is what allows talent to translate into opportunity, when teachers or administrators ignore a student's special needs. Machiavelli would treat the bureaucracy like a political structure to be navigated. He'd systematically document requests, escalate to sympathetic allies, counselors, PDA members, and create small public wins that make ignoring the student costlier than accommodating them. He would also teach the family to frame requests in terms of outcomes the school values, attendance, standardized scores, reputation, so accommodations align with institutional incentives. Change in such systems rarely comes from moral outrage alone, it comes from making the right choice also the easiest bureaucratic choice. When you're in a negotiation over a large client deal and they start demanding free trials that undercut your margins, Machiavelli would not capitulate, he'd redesign the offering into a trial that locks in dependency. He'd offer a limited pilot that delivers demonstrable ROI in a short window, tie future pricing to measured success, and require exclusivity clauses or first refusal on expanded territories. He would also make the client invest something non-monetary, workforce time, data sharing, or a joint case study, so both sides have skin in the game. The objective is to convert bargaining into a partnership where walking away is costly for both, not merely a negotiation over pennies. When a parent faces teen rebellion over identity or life choices, Machiavelli would not indulge or ignore, he'd seek influence without surrendering authority. He'd preserve core household rules while carving out protected spaces for exploration, making the teen's experiment safer and contained. He'd use strategic concessions, allow a choice of major or a gap year with conditions, and demand concrete plans in return. The idea is to shepherd autonomy while ensuring decisions remain reversible and the family remains the safety net. Power here is subtle, allow enough freedom to prevent catastrophic rebellion but with boundaries that keep mistakes recoverable. When conflict arises between two business co-founders over vision, Machiavelli would prepare for the worst while seeking the least destructive compromise. He'd build contingency plans, distinct operational control in areas each founder manages, vesting cliffs that prevent sudden exits, and arbitration mechanisms before tempers flare. He'd also secure key stakeholders, investors, top customers, so if a split occurs, one founder cannot destroy the other's ability to operate. If reconciliation fails, he'd structure the separation terms so the departing founder leaves with dignity but without the ability to immediately undercut the venture. The brutal aim: stabilize the company's trajectory. Not save egos. When a workplace whistleblower threatens to expose malpractice, Machiavelli would treat transparency and containment as twin tools. Rather than gaslight or punish immediately, he'd launch an internal inquiry that appears thorough and impartial, fix obvious problems fast, and offer restitution where appropriate. Simultaneously, he'd shore up legal and reputational defenses. He'd prefer to neutralize the threat by addressing the root causes and publicly demonstrating reform, turning exposure into an opportunity to show competence and responsibility. The point is to make disclosure less explosive and more a sign of organizational maturity. When you finally land a big win, a promotion, a large client, a viral product, Machiavelli's instinct is not to celebrate loudly but to consolidate quietly. He'd immediately shore up weak spots exposed by the win, ensure the team scales, lock in contracts, secure IP, and manage the expectations others will now have of you. He'd keep a portion of the credit private, distribute visible praise strategically to create loyalty, and prepare a follow-up plan so this win isn't a peak followed by decline. Victory in his terms is worthless unless it becomes a durable advantage. He plans for the mundane maintenance that actually preserves success: every argument, every decision, every opportunity in your life right now, from how you raise your kids, to how you navigate your job, to how you negotiate deals, is a field of strategy. And most people lose not because they're weak, but because they refuse to play consciously. Machiavelli wouldn't be the loudest. He wouldn't be the kindest. But he would be the one still standing when everyone else breaks. So take these 9 laws. Don't just hear them, live them. Apply them quietly. Let results speak louder than noise. Because the one who plans, predicts, and executes without emotion wins every time. If this video hit something deep, if it made you rethink the way you handle your family, your education, your job, or your business, then show it. Subscribe, like, and share this video. You never know who needs to hear this today.